Hello and welcome to the second in this series of Django screencasts called Django from the Ground Up. In this episode, we're going to be configuring our settings file and building models for our very first application called events. Keep in mind that all of the source code is already available online and that the actual site itself, built and completely running, is available at startthedark.com. If you scroll to the bottom, click on Open Source, there's links there to the GitHub repository where you can access the source code, and there's also a link to a ticket tracker so that you can submit bugs or patches, and there's all sorts of various things, and there will be news updates there if anything happens. So let's go into our settings file. Now, personally, I like to have a settings file that doesn't depend on the directory that it's located. So, what I do is I have a little snippet of code here that I put in almost all of my projects. And I don't know who originally came up with this particular idea. I've seen it in various tips and tricks all over, but I can't credit them because it's been so long. So, thank you to whoever first thought of this. And now I'll put in my username here and my email address here so that it will know who the admin is. I'm going to type SQLite3 here. Good database name is dev.db. For the media root, I'm going to do ospath.join project dir and media. So we've got a media folder. We're going to do http localhost 8000 media admin for this, and then I always like to add the login redirect URL right around here, just because I always tend to use the Django's built-in auth redirect controllers, and so it's really nice to just have this automatically here, so that if there's no specified next place to go, it just goes to the root of the directory. And I also like to have admin listed underneath media. I like to think of media as a directory more than being just for the admin. And then finally here in template dirs, we're going to do the same thing we did up at the top with media and stuff. So we're going to do os.path.join project dir and then templates. And then down here, we will add django.contrib.admin because everyone loves the admin. So now we're going to go into our URLs and make sure that everything's set up correctly. We'll have auto-discover working, and auto-discover will just go through all of your apps and make sure that if there's an admin file there, that we just use it. And then we'll uncomment this to get the admin, and we don't really care about any of this yet, but we will. We're starting from scratch. And we'll do manage.py syncdb. And it's asking me if I'd like to create a new one, so yes. And I would like to use Ericflow. I'll put in my email address, type in a password, and again, and it's created it successfully. Let's just do one more thing and make sure we can start up the server. And it looks like we can. Now, one of the things that, it doesn't really make sense to launch up a browser right now because we don't have anything registered with the admin. There's not a whole lot to see or do. So what I'm going to do is go back into the file, into the folder, and let's think about what we want to do. What I think we want to do first is start a new app, because the central idea behind this site that we're going to be building is that people can post events. So what we want to do is create an app for hosting different events. So we'll do Python manage.py start app events. And if you'll look, there's now a folder created called events. And we'll go into there, and there's a init file, there's models, and there's views. Pretty standard things. We're going to be expanding this as we go through the project, but for right now, it'll suit us just fine. Now, so I know some people like to build out all of their URLs and figure out how this site is going to be laid out first. But personally, I like to figure out exactly how I'm going to model the data first. So I like to start with the data. So let's go into the events, and then let's go into the models there. And what we'll do is we'll create our first model called event, and we'll have it inherit from models.model. And so the first thing we want is just a description equals models.text field. So some text describing what the event is. And then let's do a creation date. equals date time field, and we'll have it default to datetime.now. So now we got to actually go in and import datetime from datetime, import datetime, and I know we're going to use time delta later, so I'm just going to import it now. Don't worry about that quite yet. So note that we didn't put the parentheses here because if we did that, this would actually evaluate and store that, and every time a new event was created, it would have the same date. But if we keep this out, we're actually passing the function, which will get called every time a new one is created. So then we go and we're gonna. What I want to have the concept of a start date. So models.datetime field, and now this is going to be the date that the event is going to start based on what we're going to do is actually try and infer the start date based on the description. So if we can parse out anything in the description that says, maybe if it says 9 p.m. or maybe it says 10:30, a.m., I think we're going to try and capture that, but we're not very sure that that's going to be able to be possible. So let's make this null equals true and blank equals true, because every description might not actually give a time. Or our parsing might not work, so let's just make sure that that's nullable. Now, it's probably a good thing also to make sure that we know who created it. So creator equals models.foreign key to user. Now we have to import user as well. So from django.contrib.auth.models import user. And we also want to know who's attending the event. So we'll make an attendees thing, and that's going to be a models.many-to-many field, because we want many people to be able to attend many events. And we're going to make that through user. Now, since we've got two different distinct relation fields going through user, we're probably going to want to make one of them have a related name, something that's not going to, that we can refer back to it in the other direction. So we're going to say related name equals event creator set. Okay, so now let's make a Unicode. So whenever we refer to an instance of one of these event objects, we want it to print something out, or we want to have some sort of a string representation. So what we can do is return self.description, and that will mean that every time we refer to one of these events, if we refer to it textually, it will return its description. Now, one of the overall general ideas of the site is that we're going to be thinking about things that our friends are doing tonight. Now, we don't want our friends to be able to just enter willy-nilly all sorts of different events. We want to have basically one event per night per person. But we don't want to restrict people to only being stuck with what they've put in. So what we really want is the latest event of each person per night. Which, if you're starting to kind of go cross-eyed thinking about the SQL to represent that, yeah, me too. The SQL is actually a little bit hairy. I was looking up you have to do a subquery, and it's just not too fun. And you definitely will have a hard time doing it in the Django ORM. So one way we can get over that is we can actually have a denormalized field on the model that we control ourselves called latest equals models.boolean field, and we're going to default that to true, meaning the latest being true signifies that it's the latest event for a user for the night. So how can we ensure that that's the case? We need to override the save method, and we'll take in whatever arguments a save already takes in. And then what we want to do is let's query for all of the events that are set to the latest for the user. .objects.filter latest equals true, so we've got all the latest events. Creator equals self.creator, so we've got the same creator as the one that created this. And now here's the tricky part. We have to get all of the ones for today. So we have to start figuring out when the start and the end of today is. So first of all, let's just figure out when now is. So now equals datetime.now. And start is going to be datetime.min, which is the very smallest date time there is. Everything is zeros. I think there's the date, the year might not be zero, but everything is basically zeros. And we're going to replace, excuse me, we're going to replace the year with now's year. We're going to replace the month with now's month. And we're going to replace the day with now's day. Very simple. So we've got the very start of today. And now the end is going to be the start plus time delta of 1 day. So we're actually going to, what we've got right here in between these parentheses is we've got the very start of tomorrow. And now what we want to do is subtract the very smallest unit of time we can possibly muster. So we're going to subtract time delta dot resolution, which is, resolution, which is the smallest amount of time we have. And so we've got, if we're starting at the very beginning of today, subtracting a small unit of time, we've got the beginning of yesterday. Or the end of today, I'm sorry. So let's add that onto this filter. So what we'll do is we'll say dot filter creation date, and then we'll give it a range of start and end. So now we've got all of the objects created by this user who are considered to be the latest, filtered by to be just the things for today. And we're going to issue an update command, and in that update command we want to make sure that everything else is set to latest is set to false. Then we can go through and pass super event self dot save, and assuming that whoever has created this event object is using the default of true, we can be sure that the new one will be the latest. And then one extra thing I want to add is that I want to I want to store some more information other than just who is attending the event. I want to actually store the information about when they signed up to attend the event. So I'm going to create a class called attendance models.model. It's a standard model. And let's do a mapping from a user to event. So user equals models.foreign foreign key to user, and then event is a models.foreign key to event. So we've got a mapping from user to event, and then we want to do a registration date, and models.date time field with defaults to date time.now, just the same way that up here our creation date is date time.now. And then if we want to make some sort of a Unicode, we'll make that return something fancy like the user is attending the other thing. So we'll put it self.user.username and then self.event. So we're getting a little fancy here in terms of like how we're going to represent it, but that's not too big of a deal. But how do we make the event and the user model, how do we make it use this attendance sort of mapping here? Well, it turns out it's pretty easy to do that. What we do right here is we just say through equals attendance. So these are basically the models that we're going to want to have. Let's go into our settings file. Let's add the application. We'll call it events because that's what it's called. And then when we go here, hopefully we haven't made any spelling mistakes or anything. We're going to go back out of events. We'll do python manage.py. We'll syncdb, and it looks like it installed the index and the tables, and everything seemed like it went just great. So that's the end of this screencast, and in the next screencast we're going to go through some of the more advanced model features, and we're going to get it set up with the administration tool and maybe some other small tasks. So that's the end, and I will see you in the next screencast. Thanks.